Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone. Lovely to see so many people here today. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Heather Beach, and I am the founder of Women in Health and Safety. And I also founded Healthy Work Company, which is a wellbeing training and consultancy organisation. And I'm delighted to be joined here today by this eminent panel to discuss Don't Just Shrink It and Pink It, what women really need from their PPE. So our panel today is made up of, and I'm going to start at the end there, we've got Darren, Tony.
Yep.
Get the name right would be a good start,
I've been
wouldn't
called
it?
worse.
Tony Sutton. So Tony is at Sioen, and he's a sales manager there. They are a market-leading manufacturer of technical workwear, and he supports the users and distribution network between Northern England and Scotland. He has almost 10 years combined industry experience and is keen to support the correct choice of workwear that is both fit for purpose and comfortable to wear. Isn't that the holy grail? That's what we're looking for, isn't it? Then we have Jo Minns. So Jo is head of operations for the North for RS. She has more than 18 years experience within B2B distribution, initially with Staples, then Arco, now RS. So she really knows what the manufacturers are doing. She's passionate about putting the customer first and demonstrating how RS can help solve their biggest challenges, working collectively in an honest and trustworthy partnership. And then we have someone who actually needs no introduction, the famous or infamous Alan Murray. So Alan has been in the safety and health industry since the 1980s, looking good on it. He has led the BSIF, the British Safety Industry Federation, as chief exec since the start of 2014. The BSIF is dedicated to supporting those who keep people safe and healthy at work, and passionate about that health and safety performance in the UK is appreciated for the force for good that it is. So they administer the Registered Safety Suppliers Scheme, ensuring quality products are available to users through capable suppliers. So, and finally, and definitely not least, and I've introduced her last for a reason, because Katherine is here to represent the user. And as you can see, she is kitted out in PPE, which she thinks is fit for purpose. And Katherine is a mining geologist, and she's the founder of Boulders Brass, which is a gender equity group and catalyst in industry culture change. She improves allyship and advocacy, educates heavy industry bodies, and on zones of inequity. She's been working on improving women's safety in masculine and safety critical workplaces for the last few years, focusing on the top issues women face that are both dangerous and impacting their career progression. So, delighted to be joined by this panel here today. Now, the subject of PPE. Like Alan, I've been in the industry since the 1980s as well. And this subject has bobbled along. People have talked about it. And really recently, there's become a massive coalition of support which has started to build. SHP, Safety and Health Practitioner, I don't know if any of you subscribe to that. They started a campaign earlier this year, and they're working with HSE, as is Alan Murray, and various other industry bodies to try to progress inspections and other areas in this field. Over and above that, Labour MP Emma Hardy tabled the Personal Protective Equipment at Work Protected Characteristics Bill during an adjournment debate in the Commons. And finally, in January, the Considerate Construction Scheme added women's PPE to its contractor checklist, meaning companies that opt into the code are expected to ensure proper fitting PPE for women is available on all sites. This topic is also featured very strongly in the RS report, which came out yesterday, and I was very lucky to be sent a copy in advance, and you will be able to download a copy at the end of this. I highly recommend that you download it and have a look at it. It also looks at this topic of women's PPE in there. Now, I always like interaction. So we don't want you just to sit there, we want you to interact with us too. So we're looking first of all for a QR code on, there you go. So if you will, where is that QR code? Oh, 2 minutes, you want me to expatiate for 2 minutes? Fair enough. There you go, right, so can you scan that please, scan that code. and submit one word that describes your experience of women's PPE or workwear ranges. So if you could just do that now, please. And our lovely lady at the back will be putting that into a word cloud so that we can see what comes out from that.
Oh, we got one.
Limited options, abysmal. Hello, we've got lots of limited options coming up. Oversized, expensive. That's interesting. So it's more expensive. Poor choice. About time. Yes. Uncomfortable, big. Oversized is an option, a big one there. So we haven't really got any positive words there apart from about time. Poor, uncomfortable, substandard, abysmal. Very interesting. Okay, so our key issues are that it's oversized and that there are limited options as well as all the other issues in there. So it's clearly an issue, this. Now, we are going to pop another QR code onto the screen. And as we go through the next part of the discussion, we'd like you to submit any questions that you have for the panel as we go through. And we're going to try and get to some of those as well. Okay, so I have got some questions that were submitted in advance, but please do pop your questions in and we'll try and get to many of those. One of the things that I thought was really interesting about the report was that 82% of respondents to RS's survey believe that more needs to be done to ensure women have suitable equipment. The other thing I thought was really interesting is that 40% of the workwear that you're procuring or PPE that you're procuring is for women. And yet, only 1% rank this as an important factor when buying items. Only 1%. What a massive contradiction. Isn't that interesting? Now, I'm going to go to Darren first, because when we had our pre-chat, Darren said something very interesting, which was also 1%. Can you remember what it was you said, Darren?
Yeah, so when we had our little chat the other day, I discussed some of the findings that I find with end users. So we'll go through the process, and a lot of tenders now will actually ask for, they must have a ladies fit option. And then you go through the process, you do the wearer trials, but then when you actually get down to the end result, the majority of them choose to just go with a unisex fit. So it's something that somewhere along the lines it's falling down, and somewhere that obviously the manufacturers, distributors, end users all have to work together to try and improve on.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to go to Katherine, because Katherine can tell us why they go for unisex. So can you explain, and then we'll go to these people to have a bit more conversation about that.
Working with brands and manufacturers, you can see that there is a big problem in sizing being not quite as your sizes are. So you're having to size up. Sizing up is an issue for women because we've been told our entire lives, disappear. You need to be taking up less space. For men, it's take up more space, be louder. For women, it's be smaller, be more neat. You don't need to be bigger. So when we get told that we need to size up 2 sizes because this size doesn't quite work out into a UK size, that's a big impact on lending. Another thing is that a lot of the continental European PPE is a lot tighter than ours. We don't like to have tight clothing. If you've got a brand that is making clothing that feels like it's sprayed on, 4-way stretch, women don't want that. You don't need to be objectified in the workplace. Women don't want people staring at their arse. So I think there is a problem that the fit isn't right, the sizing isn't right, the expense, because you have to produce these pieces of PPE in smaller numbers, it costs more. But that expense isn't being spread out across the entire range of the brand. There is an obvious difference between males and women's. So the women may have picked the women's fit, but when it gets back to actually buying the pieces and then they get sent something completely different to what they ordered. Not because of the brands, but because their procurement team has vetoed it in between. So it's not about the end user anymore, it's about money. And so much of it comes back to money. And we're still pushing the thing that unisex is for everybody. But we know it's not. Unisex is only for men. It's based on men's measurements. It may have been done in certain cases. But how often do you hear a man say, this unisex piece of PPE is far too tight on the waist, the crotch is cutting me in two, the shoulders are far too narrow, of these boots I can barely get my feet into them. You never hear that, but you'll hear the opposite for women.
Thank you very, very much. That's a very good explanation. I'm going to ask Jo to talk about this now. So, sizing and cost. Can you speak to both those issues? Because I was speaking to Carla earlier, and she was telling me a horror story about being enveloped in a massive thing that made her look like Mr. Blobby. And I was saying I don't understand, because men are different sizes too. We've got very tall men, we've got slightly plumptious men, we've got all sorts of shapes. So why is it different for male and female?
So, I mean, I think, is my microphone working? Yes. So I think Katherine has echoed the comments that I was going to say in terms of, there are different types of PPE that are all in different sizes and shapes for different people, but they are expensive because they're more of a bespoke garment, and it generally tends to be the procurement teams within businesses that actually veto that at the end. So I think, there is the clothing that is available. It's obviously in a smaller range that's available in comparison to obviously your male and your unisex ranges, but it is out there. You have to look for it, and it does cost a little bit more. So we need to make sure that all of our companies and all of our employers are working together within the industry to make sure that we make it a price appropriate so that everybody can have accessibility to it.
So if 40% of users are women, then is there, as Katherine said, is there an opportunity to spread cost across the range? Is that something that manufacturers could be looking at?
So we're not a manufacturer, but I think there's something that we should be doing in terms of everybody should be coming together, industry bodies, manufacturers, to make sure that we try and make it equal for everybody. So, businesses talk a lot about equality, but actually are we following it through and doing it, to the nth degree?
Thank you very much. Could you pop the question QR code up, please? Thank you very much. I'm now going to come to Alan, because I'm hoping you're going to have a really broad industry perspective on this for us.
Well, the issue of equalising cost across garment, that's eminently fixable. And that's just a commercial decision.
Yeah.
And I actually don't think that's the issue. Katherine brought the point up first. It was echoed by Jo, and it is about procurement vetoing or changing the decision. So typically we think that a safety and health professional will have an input into what PPE or safety equipment is being used. A procurement team will be involved in sourcing. Typically that's what we think about. In this example, this is classic for me. It's about making informed decisions about what is important. And I cannot believe that HR and human resources aren't involved in this type of discussion. And that's very important. And also, I don't want to change the topic at all, but in the mental health discussion, human resources are involved. So human resources are involved in health, safety and well-being of the people for whom they're responsible. They should also have an opinion about people they represent within a company. And in this discussion, that's females or people of different sizes and shapes. PPE is vitally important. There's fabulous PPE out there. It mustn't be compromised in its performance by the fit. Simple as that.
That's very interesting, Alan, because I noticed from the report that only 11% of respondents said that cost was a primary motivator. And I think that people like to think that actually, it's all about fit for purpose. But the reality is that when it comes to the crunch, often cost does come into it. Even though they say it doesn't, it may well do. So what is the disconnect between procurement and the health and safety professional here? Because they're procuring all sorts of things that the health and safety guy will or girl will tell them. So why is it specific to PPE, this issue?
I don't think it is.
Okay.
Frankly, in different companies, procurement will have different levels of power. It will be different across different employers. But the point is, employers have a duty of care to protect all their people, not just a section of them.
Yeah.
And the PPE regulations at work say that you have to involve your employees in the selection of the PPE. There has to be, should be wearer panels. People should be involved. Again, it's about making informed decisions. It's not about, you can pick up a product, doesn't meet a European standard, and that's the criteria. It's not like that. The decisions have to be better. Another point Katherine made about different sizing and styles, Europe versus UK. Our PPE standards tend to be premised on European standards, and the overall volumes generate the ranges of PPE that we have. We are not tied to that, but standard sizing across any clothing is an issue, whether that's retail, leisure wear, whatever it happens to be. So, but I think we're making progress. I think clothing is probably the most challenging. I mean, I've got a couple of props here that are...
Please, I know you've been dying to send us show us your props. Just 1 second. If you would like to ask the panel a question, please do pop that code in and then just ask away, and I will attempt to get to as many as possible. I think Bex is going to screen them for bad language at the back there, and then she's going to ask me any that remain. But Alan, while they're doing that, show us your props, please.
No, just an example. One of the barriers we have is to performance would be fit. But if you have an example of a helmet here, and this is a helmet made in the UK, this has adjustability. So adjustability in certain products solve the problem to a large degree. Not everywhere, but so a properly specified helmet with a proper harness that adjusts 360, it doesn't just make it tighter at the front and tighter at the back and gap in the middle. That's there. There's other ones made, respiratory products made in the UK again. Post-COVID, it became clearer and more aware that the profile of the employees in the NHS were not Caucasian and they were not male, and that whisper becomes a shout, and then that changes the culture eventually. So we just have to keep pushing forward. Lots of products and adjustability, clothing, footwear, probably not so much.
Thank you very much. Darren, I'm going to ask you to speak to that from the manufacturer perspective. Adjustability, how difficult is that to achieve?
Yeah, definitely. Firstly, if I could just touch on some of the barriers that we're finding with our discussions. A lot of purchasing teams, they want a one-size-fits-all approach, and it's not necessarily the case, and I think sometimes that can affect the wearability and the comfort of garments, because they want a one workwear item for everyone rather than looking at different ranges, so people in different job roles having a slightly less or slightly more protection or slightly different fit depending on their job role within the business.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
And then what was your question, Heather, sorry, on?
Well, I'll just repeat it, Tony. You probably didn't want to answer it because I called you Darren again, but that's fine. So, Tony, my question was adjustability. How difficult is that to achieve? Because Alan thinks that that's one of the critical things that we could do.
Yeah, so there's certain areas obviously within clothing that you can sort of tighten and fix, but when you're wearing sort of like trousers, if you're a very short leg and you've got a regular leg length and you're rolling it up, that could compromise the safety element of the trouser, because then you're actually taking away some of the reflective tape. Sizing can pose issue definitely on the smaller sizes. Certainly when you look at like the high vis standard that Catherine's wearing there, you wouldn't achieve high vis standard on some really small garments, so you need a certain amount of fluorescent fabric and a certain amount of reflective tape to actually achieve standards. So that's really important and a consideration for manufacturers as well.
Can I ask you the same question? What do you think from a manufacturer and distributor perspective, what do you think is critical to get right here now?
So I think I always think this microphone's not working. Is it working? Do I need one? So I think in terms of the range that we've got, we just need to make sure that it's we've got everyone can see what's available. So I think there's lots of ranges around this show today of women's PPE, and we need to make sure that every end user has accessibility to the right products. And we can then champion it from the bottom, and then also with the industry experts like the BSIF, we can also champion it from the top. And I think if everyone comes together, we can really make a difference here. But I think it's not just one pocket of a manufacturer or a distributor or an end user or an industry expert. We all need to do everything together to make sure that we champion the change.
That's brilliant, and I am going to come to that at the end, this coalition which is building, which is brilliant to see. It's not all happening in a vacuum, is it? But can I just go to Katherine now? Would you mind standing up and showing us what you've got and why you recommend those products specifically?
These Rockfall boots are the ones that Bonus Brass designed them, so they can be designed with the end user. They've got boa fronts, easy on, easy off. They've got composite toe instead of steel toe pads, so that they're really light. They're waterproof because we do actually need that. They're dropped in fact so you can drive in them. They've got base for going on rocky and muddy terrain rather than walking on flat surface. They're higher in the leg because the waterproof comes up higher. On the trousers, and these are from Pulsar. I had these before they were released, so I had any trials and I used them with both brass and different shades as well. Underneath that I got a Leo vest where this type of chevron, instead of the sewn on strip that's hard, that effectively bound and stretch with your body. Then onto this jacket I've just rolled off trying because I was old. And it's really, I'd say true to size. It's quite it's small, but it fits me really well, and I say I'm putting like small to medium. And the length is really good. This can be worn in a furnace, so it's even women who work in the steel making find PPE that fits. It is there. It is more difficult to find, but because we keep on buying the cheapest option is usually the naffest option, and it's usually the option that has the least ethical making. So it's not just about the PPE for the right people, it's about where it's come from as well, the ethics in the background. But there are lots of gloves that are available that fit sizes down to a 4, which is that's a double extra small as a 4, and up to a 13, and I'm sure they'll go higher than a 13 as well. Hard hats. When I'm looking at this hard hat, I can tell that this hard hat would be really good for me. It would be really good for a woman who has a ponytail. It wouldn't be very good for a woman who's got natural afro hair because you don't have that gap between the plastic shell and, well, there's quite a gap in there, but there needs to be more around the edge. So something like MSA with a fantastic hard hat for black women and women with afro hair and wigs, and something that you can fit a hijab under. He'll make a longer polo shirt with long arms that is a lot looser but still conforms. That is a tunic for women who dress modestly. Something that is really, really important is black gussets.
Goodness me.
Gussets. I get a point for every time I say this. So black gussets, because of the period stress, if you're driving a dozer or a shuttle, they bounce. It's a lot of bouncing, and that can create blood spill. And that's a really, really stressful thing that takes your brain off the safety critical environment that you're in and to your crotch. That's not like a brain should be. Like 50% of people on the planet will have a period at some point in their life. We need to actually build that in. We can't just expect women to slot into this environment that's been made for men, that's still designed for men. We need to think of how the anatomy of the female body is different to that of the male.
Thank you very much. And I am going to ask you a supplementary question then because I love this one. Has a highly educated woman like Katherine ever felt like leaving a company because of not being given the right clothing for her job? I'm imagining it would be hard to go elsewhere because you're not going to get the right clothing anywhere, but...
Yeah, this happened. I've definitely not been given the correct for what we're doing, but no. It's never been the only reason why I felt that I needed to leave, but it's microaggression that adds to it. And it's not just, there's never just that one thing, there's everything else. So if they're not getting the PPE right, which is basic safety, there are many, many other things that they are getting right as well. So that will lead into pretty much every other tier. And you're not going to make all better jobs if you can't get basics right.
Thank you very
I
much.
think coming back to my
go on,
point from earlier
Tony.
on, sometimes, a lot of the time, the women's PPE and workwear is a bit of an afterthought. And although it's written into the technical details for the tender process that it must have a ladies option, it's always not the first thing that comes to mind. It's sort of the second thing. So it's kind of like, oh, we've sorted the men's stuff out, now we're stuck for the ladies fit, so what do we do? So we'll get a lot of calls as a manufacturer, what have you got in a ladies fit that's going to fit with this tender? This is some of the stuff I put forward on the men's stuff, but we're just struggling for a ladies fit. So it's a bit of an afterthought, and that mindset does need to change from everyone.
So what I have noticed from being part of this industry for a long time is that sadly it's quite, legislation often has to change, doesn't it? Or enforcement has to change in order to really make a difference. Alan, can you speak to what's happening in this arena? So I know that you've got some work going on with HSE, you BSIF are building something, there's something going on in Parliament, isn't there? So what changes are being made on that front?
So I think plenty of regulations exist that require to be enforced, but legislation takes an awful long time. So this is here and now, and I made the point earlier about human resources and decision making and proper informed decision making. So we have lots of companies who talk about their corporate social responsibilities, and they make big things of that.
Yeah.
This should be included in that mindset, and that's back to governance and human resources.
Yeah.
And I think that's an avenue that we should progress way before legislation. However, product standards aren't legislation, but product standards change all the time and they evolve. And standards in the future for PPE will include clauses on things like sustainability, but they will also include clauses on inclusion. So that will gradually help.
Brilliant. And so, I mean, what a lot of organisations are talking about now is ESG, isn't it? And that's an element which we can utilise when we're putting pressure on to say, look, in our ESG reporting, this should feature.
100%.
Yeah, yeah.
In the same way, talking wider, people should advertise safety records like the.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. So, have you any thoughts, Joe, on what the stats on companies not employing women because of the cost or inconvenience of sourcing female or non-binary PPE? Is there anecdotal evidence on that at all? If that's not one for you, then any of the panel. So this is the one around, are there people that are not employing women because of the cost and inconvenience of sourcing PPE? Or do we think that it's just not a... No.
Not something I've come across.
Not something you've come across. No. Okay, great. Thank you. You think, Catherine, you think it's a thing? Go on.
I was told just this week actually that somebody it was an aquarium industry as well, that people aren't taking on women because they don't see the point of taking on women. And if we're going to make it more difficult by saying we're also going to have to provide them with PPE and things to provide everybody with lens, you need to provide them welfare, because they do pee as well. Every time there's an extra layer, they just see it as an extra layer of work that they have to do, and this is why things have changed.
It's a very interesting point, and we have this around various female issues like menopause, all of these, like having children and the fact that they're off. That's always been an issue, hasn't it? But in an era where we are right now, where inclusion is seen as a business benefit, if you can get it right, do you think that is helping? The whole mindset that we're now embracing around inclusion, diversity, is that helping?
Yeah.
Right.
Realising the importance of what it is to have a diverse workforce and the innovation that comes from that. And the ethical side of it, why are you being discriminated into this role? And I think most people aren't bad people unless they start to realise that a lot of the problems come back to their inability to address privilege and bias, oppression and discrimination. We really are getting that, to understand these words and not be so offended by it.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to ask the panel for a final question in a moment, but before I do that, can I ask one of you, probably you, Alan, to speak about the coalition around this? Because we were talking earlier about the fact there's all these things happening. There's a Considerate Constructors Clean, there's SHP's campaign, there's Emma Hardy's bill, there's what you're doing at BSIF. Is this all, are these people working together? Is there a collaboration there?
The collaboration will come through a focal point, which is probably British Standards Institute.
Okay.
And British Standards Institute has a mirror committee to a European SEN committee, and that, as I said earlier, is addressing their priorities of inclusion, sustainability, and there's several priorities, but they are front and centre of them.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'd like to ask each of the panel for their final thoughts on what one thing would make the most difference. What do you think, you in your capacity, whatever that might be, so manufacturer, distributor, BSIF, user, what is the one thing? I'm going to start with you, Tony.
Yep. So obviously the female workforce is ever growing. If you look at construction, I think it's now a 16% is a female workforce. That's growing. There's a big skills gap there. It's going to grow more. It's going to accentuate this problem. So we do need to change our mindset and actually get to the bottom of it, as Joe said earlier, not just the end user, as the manufacturer, as the distributor, everyone in it together. For us, we're launching a few new female styles. We've got some range already, but we're going to have more inclusion of stretch fabrics. Obviously, all body shapes are different. I think that's accentuated a little bit with the female body. So just having more stretch fabrics, allowing more sort of wearer comfort and everything on there too. That's one of the sort of changes that we're seeing in the industry.
Thanks, Tony. Joe?
So for us, where we've seen massive success is where we've had events like we've run within our head office at Corby, where we've brought end users, health and safety professionals and procurement teams from our customers, as well with manufacturers, to discuss this topic. And I think if you get everybody collectively in the same room talking about the same topic and understanding the importance, that's where you get success.
Brilliant, thank you. And I love this because that speaks to one of the questions. How do end users influence procurement, doesn't it? And getting them together so they understand is critical. Thanks. Alan?
So one answer is proper informed decisions being made. There's several elements to that, but that's what it ultimately amounts to. The duty holder makes a decision based on what their responsibility require, which is looking after their employees, be they of whatever gender, whatever size and shape. Really quite simple. It's just doing it right.
Thank you very much. And finally to you, Katherine.
Change the rhetoric that there is no women's PPE and women's PPE doesn't fit. Because there is, it's plentiful, it fits really well, it's not skin tight. It may be a bit more expensive, but is that extra expense worth more than a woman's life? I don't think so.
Brilliant, and that's a great place for us to end, isn't it? I'm going to hope that now a QR code is going to come up, Bex. Thank you. So please do scan that code and download the report. It's very interesting. It doesn't just deal with female PPE. It deals with the industry, the whole industry, and what's going on in the industry right now. There are 900 respondents, so it's a relatively good sample. It's a really good, clear, well-written report. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending today, for your questions, for your engagement. Thank you, Tony, Joe, Alan, and Katherine. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.